seeing how women who are showing up at the health center to get birth control leave traumatized because, you know, folks are just so staunch in their anti-stance, and, you know, it's really heartbreaking.
What Dobbs means now basically is states can do what they want. So under the Roe framework, states really couldn't do very much.
The interesting part about Kentucky's state law, from what I read, is it talks about pregnancy as being in the woman's body. It doesn't specify where in the woman's body. So this is the part that gets really tricky, right? An ectopic pregnancy is a pregnancy in the woman's body, but it's not in the uterus. We know that ectopic pregnancies cannot survive safely. I'm a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know where I stand. And so these things are they're kind of muddy, right? And one of the reasons I believe that is because the law was written by politicians, by lawyers, legislators. Like, they're not written by actual physicians, because if a physician would never write a law like that. The way the language, when I read the language on that trigger law, I'm like, this is obviously not someone who understands like basic science and how this works.
Right now, the Kentucky Constitution provides a right to privacy for healthcare decisions. So currently in Kentucky, getting an abortion is protected under the Kentucky Constitution. However, there will be a proposed amendment on the ballot this November in Kentucky that may change that.
Well, I mean, this decision is really the biggest news in generations as far as what it means for our future, for our rights and our liberties. And this was already going to be a big issue for the campaign because a lot of our leadership in Frankfort have made this a central issue. They're not talking about quality health care, making sure that our children get food, or that we address housing crises, or we invest in our local economies, or we help small family farmers, or we address folks that are dealing with black lung and not getting benefits. They've chosen to focus on abortion as a wedge.
Without some real organization on the part of reproductive rights advocates, November's looking pretty scary, I think.
If you accept the methodology that the majority uses in Dobbs, and they say this is how we figure out whether the Constitution protects some right that's not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, right? We look at history and tradition. If you accept that methodology, all of those cases are wrongly decided, right? Griswold, Lawrence, Obergefell, they're all incorrect.
When this happened, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, there was just chaos, right? And so you can assume that when something else happens, we're going to see the same kind of chaos. And how can you prepare and protect yourself against things that should never happen? But we have read in an opinion from one of the justices on the Supreme Court that he is interested in having happen. It's very scary.
We don't know how this is going to, we don't really know how this is going to affect us until it goes into effect. I think that's the scary part, is the unknown, right? We don't know. We don't know.
It's not something many women talk about. Okay, if women have had the procedure in the past, they're very they're concerned that other people might find out about it and they would be judged.
It was not an option that I didn't think it was an option if I wanted to like go to heaven and, you know, all of that stuff at that time, because that's the culture that I was growing up in. And did I necessarily want one? Not necessarily, but, you know, I mean, but I didn't know how to handle it.
My experience is that I was 16. Everything was fine. I went in for my 18-week appointment. They sent me downstairs to a different specialist and told me that my daughter was not viable with life. She had a 0% chance of survival. I chose to have an induction of labor, which is like a forced labor, and I wouldn't be able to have that. I would have to deliver her whenever she decided to die in utero. I wouldn't have that choice.
I'm not interested in getting into that conversation with people who are just so closed-minded about it. And as a dear friend of mine said to me, well, everybody's against abortion unless it's for their own daughters.
Roe versus Wade passed when I was 12 years old, so I've grown up with reproductive rights my entire life, and yet now my 23-year-old daughter has been stripped of those rights. And I think that that's disgusting, unfair. She deserves bodily autonomy. And I'm very disturbed that this country is going down the path that they're going.
I'm raising a daughter in West Virginia who has less rights now than her grandmother had, and it's unacceptable.
No matter the reason or the decisions made behind the woman's, it's their fucking business. And regardless of death or life, they shouldn't have to live with something that they don't want, or they can't afford, they can't have, or it could kill them.
When you talk to somebody who's experienced an ectopic pregnancy, who was excited about being pregnant, excited about bringing a child into the world, and then an ectopic pregnancy happens and they're forced to terminate, right? They leave that health center, and then they've got people calling them baby killers and throwing dolls at them and literally traumatizing them.